So in the last mistakes video, I covered a lot of different tips for curb appeal, but in this video, I want to cover specifically mistakes that I see homeowners making with their foundation plantings and some tips and tricks along the way to make this a real statement and a real welcoming feature for your home landscape. My name is Amy, and over at Pretty Purple Door, I help home gardeners design landscapes that are uniquely you. So let's get into some of these foundation planting mistakes and how to actually fix them. Mistake number 7 is not using evergreens and structural plants in your foundation planting. And I went over this a little bit in the curb appeal video too, but it's really important to have that winter interest. I always say start with winter interest in mind and just try to visualize what your landscape is going to look like when it's the dead of winter and nothing else is going on. This is especially important in the front of your house in your foundation planting because you're going to have visitors throughout the year no matter what season it is. So definitely start with that winter interest in mind. Incorporate some evergreen shrubs that will stay green all winter. Incorporate some really cool shapes or structural plants that kind of add a little unique touch to your landscape, and you'll be well on your way to having a beautiful foundation planting if you start with that winter interest in mind. I do have another video that talks all about winter interest. I'll leave a link to it up here somewhere and in the description so you can check that one out too when you're done with this video. And let's get on to mistake number 6. Foundation planting mistake number 6 is incorrect plant spacing. So I see this really often where the plants are crammed together and they don't have enough room to really grow to their potential. This adds a lot of maintenance to your landscape where you're going to have to start pruning and training these plants because they're overcrowded or they're blocking windows and things like that. So make sure that you're planting them according to what their full size will get. This is going to save you a lot of time and effort with this maintenance over time. And it's also going to just make them look a lot nicer. So make sure you're considering how far apart you're spacing them. If you want a more cottage or like a casual style garden, you can get away with planting a little bit closer. If you want something that's more traditional or more modern in style, you can get away with planting them a little bit further apart, but always consider that full mature size of your plant before you put it in the ground. I even measure, like to this day, I've planted so many landscapes and I still measure from trunk to trunk to make sure that I'm providing enough space for that plant to really grow, thrive, and look its best. I made an entire video about plant spacing, so I'll leave a link somewhere up here and in the description so you can check out that plant spacing video too. And I give like a lot of instruction about how far away from the house to put the plants and how far apart in different situations. So definitely check that one out too. Mistake number 5 is having the wrong scale of plants. So basically planting something that's the wrong size for the size of your property. And especially important with foundation plantings are the ends, like where the edges of your house are and what you're planting in those particular locations. That's going to help a lot with the scale. So what I recommend is just drawing a line from your front door about 2/3 of the way up the front facade of your house. So if you have a 12-foot high house, something that's about 8 feet high, 2/3 of the height of your house, that's going to create that effect that your house feels like it's nestled into the landscape and the scale is correct. The rest of the foundation plants, just make sure that you're not planting something that's too small and make sure you're not blocking windows and make sure you're not blocking walkways, but really making sure that the scale is appropriate for the house is going to help a lot. If you get this wrong, it's actually something that can really affect the resale value of your home and you don't want that. So really think about the size of your home and don't be afraid to plant something substantial enough to really nestle that house into the landscape. If you're enjoying this video so far, I'd highly recommend you check out my 3 garden design secrets training. It's a completely free training. You can sign up in the link in the description below, and I cover the top 3 mistakes I see home gardeners making and how to fix those mistakes. I also give you a little rundown of what my Design Your 4-Season Garden course is like. Again, it's totally free. I'd love for you to check it out in the description after you watch this video. Mistake number 4 is a lack of balance, and this is a big one, and it's kind of almost like a gut feeling to feel if it's balanced or not. Usually I have people come to me and they're like, it just doesn't feel balanced. Like you can know right away that you're having a balance issue in your landscape. But basically there's 2 different types of balance. One is symmetrical balance, which is really easy to achieve, especially if your front door is in the center of your home and you have a straight walkway. You can just plant the same things on the left as the right. If the one side's in the shade shade and the one is in the sun, just choose similar sized plants, and that will give you that symmetrical balance, which is just equal on both sides. Where it gets a little bit more difficult is when you need to do an asymmetrical balance, or you want a more casual style landscape. So this is where you have different size and different shaped plants on one side versus the other, and you have to kind of make sure that it's like a teeter-totter and that it's kind of floating and being balanced without throwing things off. So when it comes to that, instead of planting the same exact thing on either side, maybe you'll plant a really large shrub on one side, and then the other side you do 3 smaller shrubs, but the weight of those 3 smaller shrubs is kind of equal to the weight of the larger shrub. I know that's hard to understand, so the best way that I can explain this is if you took that large shrub, you liquefied it, and you poured it into a glass. Make sure that when you liquefy those 3 shrubs on the other side and you pour them into the glass, it reaches the same height on the glass. So you want it to be equal. Now, there's a few things that can affect how that works. And one is like the density of the shrub. So if you have a really, really dense shrub, like for example, like a big rhododendron, that's a heavy and it's a dark colored shrub. So planting 3 smaller shrubs that are more sparse or maybe like a lighter color is not going to balance it enough. You need that heaviness that the rhododendron has on the other side too. So maybe 3 plants will not be dense enough to offset the weight of the other one. So I have an entire article on my website that goes over this in detail. I drew lots of pictures and stuff. So if you really are having balance issues, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check out that article and just learn more about how you can achieve that balance, especially if your front door is like not in the front, or you have a curved walkway, or it's just imbalanced to begin with. It's a really tricky situation, but there are ways to resolve it. Mistake number 3 is having garden beds that simply aren't deep enough to accommodate the amount of plants that you'll need to nestle your home into the foundation. So I always recommend at least 6 to 8 feet deep for a foundation planting. And honestly, I probably would say 12 or more is even better. Like, you really need a lot of space. So just think about the other tip before about nestling your house in. You might need an 8-foot shrub. So if you have an 8-foot by 8-foot shrub, that's going to take up your entire garden bed if it's only 6 to 8 feet. So that space adds up quickly, not to mention you shouldn't really plant like right next to the house. So you might need a gap of like 2 feet behind those plants. So if you can bring out the planting bed and make it a lot deeper, you'll have more room to accommodate rows of plants. And that's really going to add a lot of visual interest and just a welcoming feeling to your foundation planting. I know a lot of people are going to come for me in the comments saying that they don't have the space to do that. They have a really narrow thing, or there's a walkway in front, or they just don't have the space to expand. That's totally okay too. I have students in my Design Your 4 Season Garden course that have really narrow pathways with just 2-foot by 2-foot spaces, and they've been able to sort of layer down the path instead of forward in the path. But again, if you do have a path, you can always add plants in the other side of the path. There are ways to accomplish that look where it's really deep and lush. Even if you don't think you have enough space, you probably do. But again, I'd recommend 3 rows of plantings. So if you have a 5-foot shrub and then a 3-foot shrub and then a 2-foot shrub, you're already at that max level, if not more. I'm trying to do the math in my head. I think that's 10 feet. But yeah, so it adds up really quickly. And if you can make your garden beds deeper from the get-go, I would definitely do it. You're not going to regret making them deeper. Mistake number 2 is not keeping it simple. And I talked a lot about this in the curb appeal video as well. I really think it's important, especially in the front of your home, that you're considering that people are going to be looking at your foundation planting and looking at your home from a distance. So it's important to make sure you're choosing plants that are large enough, and then choosing multiples of each plant, maybe being a little bit simpler about the style and the design so that you're planting 12 salvias instead of 1 salvia here and 1 over here, just doing larger groupings, keeping the color scheme a bit simpler, and just making it less maintenance than you would otherwise need to do if you had as many plants. So keeping it simple, especially in the beginning, especially if you're new to all of this, is definitely what I would recommend. Mistake number one, and arguably the biggest mistake that you can make with your foundation planting, is to not address drainage issues from the get-go. So if you have any kind of standing water that's near the foundation of your house, you have a big problem. It's no joke, and you need to fix it ASAP. Don't avoid this. You need to fix the drainage issues before you put in a garden. So there's two main ways that you would address the drainage issues. Number one is just regrading the yard so that it's sloping away from your house. If you don't have that option because you're down in a gully or a valley or something like that, you can put in French drains or have French drains installed, and that will take the water from your property away from your foundation where you can cause all kinds of problems, and it will take it to another area of your property. So definitely don't avoid those drainage issues. As far as having terrible soil near your foundation where it's just not draining properly, like you have clay soil or just standing water situations, you can remedy some of that with a rain garden design or planting things that don't particularly hate having wet feet, plants that like standing water. So you can address some of it by choosing plants that will tolerate that wet condition. You can add some compost and try to amend the soil over time. But again, if you have real serious drainage issues, it can be a real problem for your house and the integrity of the structure of your home. So you don't want to avoid fixing those as soon as possible, preferably before you plant anything, because I'm sure that construction workers are just going to get in there and ruin your whole foundation planting anyway, so make sure you take care of that first. And if you like this video, I have so many more mistakes videos. I'll leave a playlist right over here, and I'll see you over in that next video.